Hi, I'm Melinda Kucsera, your indie fantasy author, and we're back again with another episode of Fantasy Lore and More. And today we're here with Mary McKenna, and we're going to talk about the Lady of Ravensmere. So, welcome, and let's talk books.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, you're welcome.
Where should I start?
Well, let's tell us about the book. What's it about?
Lady of Ravensmere is, for lack of a better subgenre, I call it historical fantasy. It's I'm a huge history nerd, so it's like really, really grounded in history. And it's a coming of age story about a girl. She's 13 when the book starts.
Oh, wow.
And she is being sent away to live with a man she's never met, who's going to be her husband. And
not at 13, when she's older, right?
Well, the plan is originally they're going to get married when she's 16.
Okay, so she's
going to be his ward for a few years.
Because that's not creepy.
Yeah, but it happened. It was a thing.
That was really
yes.
In like what countries?
Well, I know it happened in Scotland. It didn't usually happen at the noble level. It was actually usually merchants. And they would send their daughters away to live with their prospective husbands, learn from his mother, kind of thing, for 3 or 4 years. And it was actually a done thing at the time.
They didn't like worry about their daughters. Like, here, take her.
A lot of times the grooms were also themselves young. So a 12-year-old girl who's going to marry this boy, he's 14 at the time. So she's going to go live with his family for a few years, and they're going to get married when she's 16 and he's 18.
Okay. So his family is then kind of...
They're responsible for her and taking care of things. So I kind of twisted it for plot purposes, because merchants aren't very interesting for story purposes sometimes.
So who's our guy?
He is a recently made lord. He grew up. He's a knight. He was a knight, but his family was not wealthy. His father was what's called a hedge knight, traveling around picking up work wherever he can, but no lands of his own, no money. Just one step up into being that class. And he saves the king's life. And so the king awards him with a castle. And then he needs a wife.
Yeah.
And so this is all political as it begins.
So who is our girl?
Her name is Ginevra. Her father is the most powerful lord in the kingdom outside of the king himself. She's the 4th cousin of the king. And she's everything she's supposed to be. Everything a young woman should be. And then she's got to come to this strange place and a castle that, she's been living in wealth, huge amounts of wealth. And this castle is broken down. It doesn't have glass in the windows. There are not nearly as many men as she's used. Her father has this well-garrisoned castle, and now she's got, 30 guys around her, and their clothes don't look nice. They don't have uniforms. It's a culture shock.
But it is his family there, like his mother or sister?
His mother is there. But she is sick. So she can't always leave her bed. And so Ginevra ends up taking on running the castle on the inside, as a lady should. And it's all about how
at 13, wow.
That's what she was trained to do. And
so she was okay with that part, the running of the castle, because that was she glad to take that on? Like, something I know how to do.
I think she doesn't. She's comfortable with the concept of it, but not necessarily in the way it happens, because it's, she doesn't have hordes of trained servants. She has some people who are going to argue with her when she tells them what to do. She doesn't have access to all of the supplies she would have. It's not, she's starting almost from scratch in developing all of this. And it's a lot for a 13-year-old girl. And that's where kind of the story starts, is her arriving at the castle to face all of this.
Wow.
So,
With that, do you want to just go into the excerpt or?
yeah, I will start with chapter 1 and how this all begins.
Yeah, I'm
So,
curious.
the carriage rumbled over the hard-packed dirt of the road. Ginevra, wrapped in her wool cloak, her feet tucked up underneath her since the warming stones had long since gone cold, looked out the curtain-covered window occasionally. She could only see the road and a little of the area beyond the road, where grass faded from green into brown. Someone, a nearby lord who took his road-keeping duties seriously, had mended the road in the past, but the dirt and rocks that filled in the ruts wore away with every wheel that passed over it, especially as the ground grew colder, until he might as well have not bothered. She would have liked to see more of where they were going, but one of her father's guardsmen rode to the side of the carriage, always keeping approximately level with her. Another rode on the other side of the carriage, outside her mother's window. On other occasions, she might have talked with them. She had always known the guards and they her, but her father and the captain of the guard considered this a dangerous area. The northern border lay a bare 20 miles away, and attacks were not uncommon. As well, the king's law had only recently been reestablished in the area, and bandits roamed too freely in the woods nearby. If she could look out the window properly, she would see her father riding in front of the wagon, his captain riding beside him. Other guards rode in front of and beside him, with outriders a mile ahead. Behind the carriage were wagons, one with the new members of her household, her companion, 3 maids, a confessor, and the other containing all her household goods, her linens and plate, her clothing, and in a hidden place the portion of her dowry that came in gold, with more guards flanking and following the wagons. A discreet throat clearing reminded her to drop the curtain, and she did. The inside of the carriage bored her, though, as she had been in it for near a fortnight. The seats were hard, despite thin cushions, and she felt every bump in the road through them. The wood of the carriage had been polished to a high finish, so that she could rest her head against the side and feel only smoothness, but nothing decorated the ceiling or the sides. Nothing drew her attention. Nothing kept out the cold. The curtains on the windows kept the wind out, and they had warm stones in the morning when they set out, and blankets and cloaks aplenty. But by midday she had chilled. It seemed too early in the year for this kind of cold. The late autumn harvests had not even been gathered in yet. At her home, she could still walk out to enjoy the last flowers. Here, frost coated the grass every morning. Conversation had become scarce as the days wore on. Her mother, who she loved dearly, had been her only companion for the journey. They had played at cards a bit, and she had read the book her father had given her before leaving, but those had paled too, leaving her with too many hours to listen to horses' hooves and wheels on the road and think. She tired of both. Despite her mother's disapproval, she drew the curtain aside again. Just beyond the guard, she could see the start of the great hills that lay just nearer the border. They were large, at least to her, though she'd been told that the mountains in the north were higher yet. She could just make out the outline of a keep, the square shape distinguishing it from the land around it. A long afternoon and evening to reach it, but they would reach it before moonrise. They would be expected. Ravensmere Keep commanded a view of miles around, and their wagon train would have been spotted easily by now. She never supposed that at some point the keep would send out riders to guide them up the mountain to the gates. She dropped the curtain again now that the end point of her journey sat in view and sank back into her cloak. In the late spring, not long past her 13th birthday, the northern invaders had been beaten back from this land for the first time in decades. The victory, as the bard told it, had rested on a small and determined force led by a young knight whose father had been friends of long standing with the king. After the battle, the king had awarded this knight, Sir Conic Torval, Ravensmere and the land around it. Sir Conic would guard the border he had won. Soon thereafter, her father, Lord Oswin, had received a message under the king's seal suggesting in strong terms that she be wed to this knight. She had not seen the letter herself. Her father would not include a mere girl in such a discussion, but from her father's temper over it, she could only conclude that the king's suggestion had been tantamount to a decree. Her father had never taken decrees well, especially not from the king, to whom he was kin, albeit distantly. But royal decrees, howsoever unwelcome, could not be gainsaid, and so her father's brother had spent the summer here, negotiating with Sir Conic the terms of their betrothal, with their marriage to follow after she reached her 16th year. She, along with her parents, now traveled to Ravensmere for the formal betrothal ceremony. They would then return home. She would remain, for the now as bride-to-be, and in 3 years as bride in truth. She would miss her home. Ravensmere might be a fine place, but it would take time before she could love it. In her heart, where no one knew her feelings, she wondered if she would ever come to love Conic, as a husband, as a companion, as a lover, as anything. She knew it was not required for a marriage, but she could not help but believe it would be a fine thing. She heard voices outside, near the front of the procession. Though she could not make out words, the tone was friendly, and she presumed that this was some knight or other from Ravensmere. Indeed, after the voices ceased, at least to her ears, the carriage began moving upward, taking the hill road. The bumps in the road grew worse. Whatever Sir Conic did or did not do as Lord of Ravensmere, tending the road did not appear to have been one of those tasks. She supposed that he had other, more urgent tasks to occupy his mind. Her uncle Lewis, when he had returned from Ravensmere to Allendale to bring her father the marriage articles, had taken time to sit with her and tell her somewhat of her to-be home. He had assured her that she would find nothing wanting in the land, that the small lake from which the keep took its name brought life aplenty to trees and plants. He did not speak as much on her new lord, other than to reassure her that he was a good man, one who took his duties seriously. And of the keep itself he had said even less. She understood his reasons when they drew through the outer wall and into the courtyard. The keep could not be described as lovely. The walls were barren, dark with the natural color of the stone. The outer wall stood strong, but the wooden gates bore testimony to the fighting that had been done here. The courtyard, the same hard-packed dirt as the road, barely seemed to fit her father's guards and the wagon, along with the few guards who belonged to Ravensmere. The tall walls of the inner keep rose high above them, and Ginevra could see few windows to allow light inside. A place of war, and she shivered. Few normal sounds greeted her ears. Some animals, horses in the stables, some others in proper enclosures, but not many. Men trained, but made little noise. She had never heard her father's castle so silent. Hundreds of people lived there, and no one could make that many people still. This silence felt empty. She heard her father swing down from his horse. The otherwise placid gray genet always tossed his head when her father dismounted, causing the harness to jingle. Heard him offered a greeting by the man waiting for them on the steps, a man she had seen for only a moment when they came through the gates. "My Lord Earl," Conic said, "you are most welcome to Ravensmere." "Lord Conic," her father replied, "I have brought you your bride." The carriage door opened, and she blinked in the sudden light filling the space. For a moment she could see little but her father's hand reaching in to hand her out. She took it and stepped out of the carriage into the courtyard of her new home. Conic looked at her, and for the space of a heartbeat she looked at him. He stood on the steps into the keep, which added to his already considerable height. Black hair cut short, shorter than the fashion at court, and dark blue eyes focused intensely on her. His face was narrow, with faint lines that made him look unyielding. He wore a mail shirt and a sword at his side, and both shirt and scabbard showed signs of use. He did not smile. Her father let go her hand. "My daughter, Ginevra Louvet of Allendale." She curtsied, aware of her appearance in that moment. She could not help that her kirtle had become travel-stained, or that her hair escaped the chaplet that held it away from her face, and now wisps blew in the breeze. "My lord," she murmured. "My lady," he replied, bowing in turn. Then he offered her his arm so that she joined him on the step. Standing beside him, she could not but notice that he still stood tall above her. His hand under hers had the calluses of a swordsman, and his arm, despite the mail between them, held very firm. So that's how she gets there and meets the man that she's going to marry.
And yeah. And now we'll have to find out how that goes.
Yeah.
Is this a standalone or is this a series?
This is book one. This one takes us to not long before her 16th birthday. And then it kind of covers, there's time gaps because I'm not going to narrate multiple years of ordinary life. Kind of skips ahead. I'm working on book two. Book two will cover about 3/4 of a year, I estimate. I don't know exactly because I haven't finished it, but it's a shorter time span.
Right.
And then there will be a third book to finish it out, probably.
All right. So let's talk about the fantasy part of this. Like, is there magic? Are there dragons?
What
was he when he was doing his hedge knight thing and going around? What was he doing when he was selling his services? What were the people buying his services having him do? I don't think that sounds right.
Yeah, it does. Mostly fighting people. There are some not normal beasts around, but we don't see a lot of them in this story. It's by reference.
Oh, that's fine.
It's this is very bold of me, but I compare it to a little bit to Guy Gabriel Kay's Sailing to Sarantium and the others, where some books have magic and some books don't have magic, but they're all in the same world, so there's magic somewhere.
Okay.
Here, right now.
Okay. I've not read him. So.
He wrote a whole bunch of historical fantasy books, and some of them have magic, and others just don't. But they're all in the same world, so there's magic somewhere, just not. Yeah,
someone's using magic, but maybe not in this book.
Here. So yeah, so there's magic broader in the world, but there's not. We're not going to see any here
in this book.
There's just the implications of it.
That's interesting too, because you need, not everybody can be out fighting the dragons and wielding the magic. Somebody has to be keeping, the castle running at home. Okay.
And this is a lot on what it's like to be the people doing ordinary tasks. Not really, because they were still nobles, but like that basic work.
Yeah, so they're living in an extraordinary world where dragons and magic happen. They don't happen where they are. They're trying to live just a regular. That's interesting too, because they're hearing about stuff happening elsewhere that's wild and magical, and they're like, okay, deep breath. It's not happening here.
Yeah. Their biggest problem is the neighbors to the north, who there's a long-standing territorial dispute going on there.
And why is that? What started the dispute?
We don't know.
We don't find out,
and we may never know. It goes back so far that nobody really knows how it all began.
It could be somebody said something.
But what it boils down to in the present time is that the people of their country think Northerners are savages and uncivilized, and the people of the North sort of object to that characterization, and they object to having people try and take over their country. It is... Occasionally I draw inspiration from Scottish history from before it was part of Great Britain, when England tried to take over Scotland, every other king, and the Scots objected all the time.
I mean,
so it's
not. Say they're still objecting.
Well, plenty of them are, but the open battles have at least stopped.
True. That's true.
So that's
the Grudges, or is that
there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. A friend of mine teases me that someday I have to write the expanded version and turn it into epic fantasy, where we have all these chapters of stuff going on in other places.
So what's going on in the background? So they're hearing reports of things happening elsewhere.
Yes, the king has exiled his only son, but nobody knows for sure why the prince is exiled. Um, and the various nobles are fighting amongst themselves to kind of take over the most powerful place. Who's going to be the one the king depends on?
Hmm.
And they, up at Ravensmere, they're not part of any of this. They are
They're just
not.
hearing about it.
They just hear about it. But it ultimately is going to come influence the plot and what happens to them later in the book, because all of this it comes to a head, and yeah,
Yeah, because
comes and they have to deal with it.
whoever gets that position will have power over
Mhm.
others and
Mhm.
their subjects as well.
Yep. And they have to deal with the problems more. That's kind of what the second book is about, is dealing
Mhm.
with all of this, but it starts to hit them at the end of this book, and kind of, yeah, is where it goes.
Okay. Are we going to find out in the second book more about what was going on with that?
Mhm.
They're going to have
Yeah,
to get more involved in
they're going to
the
get
things that.
more. And they're also going to run into people who actually know what's going on, rather than just getting letters and third-hand reports of it. They're going to actually talk to people who are there. And
I
we're going
see.
to go, oh, that's where some of this begins. Now, what do we do with it?
I see.
Eventually.
I see. I see. So a lot of this story is her adjusting, running the castle, and dealing with political intrigue. I'm sure there's some, since she's related to the
There's
king. And
absolutely some. And some of it's just growing up. She's a 13-year-old girl. And at 13, you still have a lot of growing to do, no matter how grown up you think you are.
yeah,
um, no matter how grown up the law treats you as, you still have a lot of growing up to do. She occasionally stomps her foot because she's not getting her way. She, you know, she's still a girl, and she has to grow through some of that.
does she have friends or?
Her best friend is her cousin who comes with her, and that is Cecily. And Cecily's older. She's about 19.
They didn't marry her off?
She's the poor cousin.
Ah, okay. No
She was taken
dowry.
in because she has no money. Her parents are dead. So her job is to be the companion to her wealthy cousin. Um, but she's going to get a happy ending eventually too, because I like happy endings.
Who
Everybody needs
doesn't?
everybody needs more happy endings.
I agree with that. I think the world could use, especially now with what's going on in Ukraine and elsewhere in the world. I think we can all use more happy middles,
Yeah, well,
not
that
just
too. Not
endings.
just endings, but some happy middles. I'm working on that one too. But so Cess is her best friend, and someone she can talk to and confide in as the story goes along. Connick also has his friends. He calls them the brothers of his heart. He's trained with them since they were squires, and now they are with him. And
Does
then
he
he,
still go around fighting, or does he stick around at the castle?
right at the moment, his job is to stick around at the castle and try and defend the border. Um,
Oh, so
there
the
are
castle's on the border.
Yes, they are literally the border lord right here, and
Oh,
this
I
is
see. So here, have a castle, but oh wait, it's on the border, and I will expect you to patrol the border and protect the border for free.
yeah. He
I'll
doesn't get a
send
lot of
you
money.
my fourth cousin on my sister's side.
Exactly. We all see how generous the king is right here.
Yeah, but don't expect any like reinforcements, monetary aid,
No,
weapons,
no,
arms.
no, no,
I'm
no.
gonna pretend I don't know you at social functions.
Yeah, yeah. Your reward is a wealthy wife. Now find your way out of your own problems. And
Are there is the border, is it like a hot zone of like conflict or a more,
it's at this point in time, it's more intermittent.
so it's more faint testing things?
Yeah, yeah. Um, if things had happened otherwise politically, we would have seen more battles. But because of how things, see, I can't tell you without telling too much of the story. If things had happened differently, then it would have turned into more of a big conflict.
So the
But
people in the
because of what
north are
happens,
less, they like him better than who else could have gotten the castle.
well, actually, it's more that, oh, it's hard to explain. What happens inadvertently will draw them in a way that they didn't intend to be pulled into the situation. Um, so the major attack that they had planned on doesn't happen because the situation changes so dramatically.
So something happens to pull them into the situation that we
Yeah.
have to read the book to find out.
Hmm. And actually, you don't get full answers to that until the second book. The second book, that's kind of where I start off with is, okay, now in the first 15,000 words, I think it's about 15,000 words, I actually explain, have a character tell them, this is why this happened. And then we
Is
all go, uh-huh.
Are you writing it now, or is the second book out?
The second book is not out. I am writing it. I am about 35,000 words into it. So I'm theoretically, knock on wood, coming up on the halfway point. But we'll see, because I never know until I get there.
Yeah. Yeah. My books vary widely in length as well. It all depends on the characters and how long it takes them to do the things they're supposed to do.
Yes.
And the books that are longer, it's because they didn't do the things they were supposed to do. It took them a while.
Exactly.
We
And
can't make them do things, you know? We can
And
we can
they're
put the situation in front of them, and if they avoid it, we don't have too many options
exactly.
as
Exactly.
authors.
And I've got all sorts of things that they have to finish doing before we move on. And they're,
Yeah. And
doing it their way.
Sometimes they're super gung ho and get it done, and the book ends up being shorter, and you're like, wait, why don't you behave all the time?
Yeah, that's not happening this time around. I can
No.
assure you.
The more books you write, the more wily the characters become. The better they are at getting around you, doing things that distract you, and you don't realize that they're not going to do the thing you want. That they're setting things up to do something totally different. Oh, they get tricky.
Yes.
Yep. I hope yours don't. Mine are like feral cats now.
I fully expect them to do. If they start behaving, I wouldn't know what to do with myself anyway. I mean, then that would be easy.
Yeah, it's kind of fun when they throw random things at you and you're like, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, and it makes for a more interesting story.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get you to point B where you're supposed to be. This is so cool. But who cares? That's a tomorrow problem.
Yeah, I have a whole plot curve in book 2 that I did not anticipate, and I have no idea how we're going to resolve that. No,
and then,
no idea whatsoever.
Yeah. It happens. So let's hope that's the only curveball they throw you.
It's the only one that big. But I'll write it out and we'll figure it out.
Because the more point of views you have, the more curveballs they can throw.
That is part of the reason why these are 2 viewpoint books. It's truly what keeps them from being, part of what keeps them from being epic is it's only 2 viewpoints, hers and his.
I would say you don't just the number of viewpoints does not define whether something is epic fantasy or not.
No,
because I've read epic fantasy books that were first person, one point of view. It's more like the scope of the story, I think. Because I also do write like very slice of life sort of epic fantasy, but there's so much magic and there's so much stuff going on. It gets like, the devil shows up and starts enslaving everyone around. You're in epic fantasy, even though you haven't left home. He came to your city. You didn't go anywhere.
That is true. That is very true.
Like I feel like it's the scope of the story versus how many points of view.
True, but I do think there's kind of a trend right now into we need lots of viewpoints in part to show the scope of the story.
I don't think that's necessary. I can do it in like 1 or 2 points of view. I don't need 50 points of view.
Well, I don't either, but
because like if your world building is really solid and you have like really epic things in there, like things that are just big in scope, you can do it with like smaller, you don't need as many points of
Yeah.
view, especially if like the whole story is revolving around this thing and everybody's grappling with it, then I don't know. That's just because I write epic fantasy. That's all I
Yeah.
write. So makes it easy when I go put books on Amazon, like pick categories, like where's epic fantasy?
Well, that makes it easier for you. I'm float around, do different things.
Oh, and that's good too. It's, at some point I'd like to write other stuff, but who knows if that'll ever happen.
Mm,
Everything starts out going, somewhere else and then comes back around to epic fantasy because I'm like,
oh,
wouldn't it be cool if magic?
you know, I love to read romance, but I never write romance because I can't keep it a straight romance. I
Yeah.
I can start writing romance, but it doesn't stay romance before suddenly there's dragons and griffins, and then suddenly it's
Well,
you
that's
know.
fantasy romance is a very popular subgenre.
Sometimes then I forget the romance, though. I get all that other stuff in, and then the romance falls out.
This is why I don't. This is why I don't. Even if I set out to do like, even if the characters want to be in some kind of romantic situation, I will not call it a romance because I'm like, I have no guarantee that you guys are going to actually do any of the things required for a romance.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
might like each other, but you may never get beyond that because of all the other interesting things you want to do. So
Exactly.
we're not going to
And
give people the expectation that this relationship is going to go anywhere except hunting monsters.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And yeah, sometimes
I'm
the
with you.
romance falls out, and then I'm like, okay, well, that's not romance anymore. It's
I mean,
something else fun.
my current whip is they wanted it to be a romance, these two characters, but like one of them is in the past hunting for answers, one of them is in the future doing something. I was like, guys, it was a guy and a girl. I'm like, people, this is not a romance. You two are like, there's only 2 chapters of the book where you're actually in the same time period in the same location, and one of you is unconscious for most of it. This
That
does
makes
not
the
a
romance
romance
tough.
make.
Yeah, that's very tough then.
Well, so I have to figure it out for another. It's going to have to be more than one book. These two, because
Yeah.
they show up somewhere else and they are engaged, and I'm like, okay, you have to do the romance thing at some point because you are engaged when you show up in this other book, and the whole point of you getting these stories is to explain what you are doing in this other book because it doesn't. It's so wild that I need explanation. I need
I
you to
understand.
justify it for me. So yeah, no, I don't want to get off track on that because that's my current like problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Understood. Understood.
I just can't proceed with my heart series, like my series
Mm.
that I love, because they showed up in it and screwed everything up, and I'm like, I need to know why and how I can get my characters that I love to get around this. So,
Yeah.
anyways, I'm being held hostage by this story. I'm not happy
Yeah, that
about
happens.
it. Yeah. Let's get back to Lady of Ravensmere though.
Okay.
So we've got cool magical stuff happening elsewhere that's gonna start affecting things towards the end of the book. And then in the second book, we've got politics, we've got the issues with the people in the north. Is this leading towards like a war? Like I'm getting the war vibes. Like we're going towards some kind of a war
We're going
situation.
towards something like that. If okay, so it's trilogy, right? I have
Yeah.
titles. It's planned to be 3 books.
So what's the title of book 2?
Book 2 is going to be Lady of the North, and
I'm guessing she goes up north.
yeah, I'm real subtle with my titles.
Right. For reasons.
But
And
if it
what's the
doesn't,
third one
the
going to be
third book
called?
is Lady of the Court. Again, very subtle. Can give everybody 3 clues, 3 guesses what that one goes to, and but
Should I guess?
yeah, it's real hard, isn't it? But
Well, I mean, there's probably a court up north, and there's probably a court in her own, country. So it could be either one, or a different
true.
country's court. So it's actually kind of tricky, that one.
I suspect that though that by the time a reader gets to the end of book 2, they will not be surprised about which court it goes to, because the end of book 2 should theoretically kind of point you where that one goes.
If the characters do what they're
If the
supposed to.
characters do what they're supposed to do. Because if they don't,
Otherwise, you could be writing a whole different book for Brooke to
well,
read than you thought.
so in response to your thing about this leading to war, if it goes that way, which it could, but I'm not sure because the characters do what they feel like doing.
Yeah, you're not at the end of book 2 yet, so you have no
Yeah,
guarantee that it's gonna go where you think it is.
exactly. It's possible that there will be another book that will be called Lady of War, because again, I am not subtle at titles. And then we
Hey,
will see what happens with that one.
there's nothing wrong with beating people over the head with it.
I'm not good at titles, so I
I'm
have
not
to
either, I just
sometimes go with the
whatever
obvious.
yeah, like, whatever comes into mind, you know?
Yeah,
There's a joust in one of the books that I'm writing, so I'm just gonna call it Joust.
that's an excellent title.
A
I approve
very
of that.
unoriginal title.
But it's very good and it gets to the point.
Yeah, there is a joust.
Mhm.
I'm promising something that actually happens in it.
And there you go. That's the thing. You're not making false promises.
No, which we try not to do, as
Mhm.
authors.
Exactly.
So, let's so, like, does religion play? Because you said you're basing this off, like, Scotland and its
Th-
conflicts with
there's
England,
an
so and
influence. Yeah.
religion played a big role kind of in that. Does it
Yeah,
play a role in your story?
it does, although less with that conflict and more with the ro- more with the other conflict that we haven't really gotten to that comes up more
Let's
in.
let's talk about
There's
the
many
other
conflicts.
conflict. Let's talk about the other conflict.
Yeah. Um, Early on in the book, I allude to the fact that now that they have largely settled the battle with the border with the North for a while, that the king is going to turn his attention to the other war that he has had going on. And that
Oh,
one's
he
been
had
going,
2?
yeah, that one's been going on for 30 years. It's kind of an on and off. Um,
Why do they have so many wars? They're
that's a
trying to expand the borders or, like, some
it's
kind of
yeah, it's
manifest
about
destiny thing?
it's mostly about territory and who really owns the stuff. And if you read
Does
a
he
lot of
need the stuff? Because like, sometimes people go to work as like, "Oh, you have grain. I need grain. I'm gonna take you over
no,
and get your
it's
grain."
it's more about I should be the most powerful king, which means this should be all my stuff and not your stuff. And there's kind of a lot of that actually in parts of history where it's just about pride and ego, and that's what some of this is. So he's got the problem with the North, and he's got this other one that they've been fighting for like 30 years on and off.
And where's
And
that? So we've got the North. Where's this other
It's
conflict?
it's off to it's the country east of them,
Is it a large country?
comparable in size to theirs. It's not there's not a clear dominant power there. That's part of why it's gone on so long, on and off, is that neither side has a clear dominance there.
I see. I see.
So
I see.
so that one, the king's now going to turn his attention to that one, which the nobles don't like. The nobles are tired of this. It costs a lot of money to keep these wars going. They do not
And
want to have
manpower.
and manpower, and they don't want to keep doing this. So that's some of the background politics. And
Do they like conscript fighters or
um, the lords do, because the king tells the lords, "I need 10,000 guys, and you're responsible for coming up with 2,000 of them." And then the lord has to go, I don't know, browbeat his peasants until he manages to put together his 2,000 guys to bring him to the king. It's feudalism in action at its
yeah,
best. Um,
that's how it
so
was though.
yeah, I mean that's I have a degree in history. So that's why I pull a lot of this is based on really what was going on and how it worked. Um, so there's that conflict. That side is more about religion, or the religion gets more tied in there. They all mostly worship the same god and goddess, but they don't all interpret it the same way. Um, some of the people over that way believe it a little bit different than the people in this country do. And that's going to be a problem for some of them, because it's always a problem for someone when somebody else believes differently and then comes into your country. That's
Do they
always a
have
problem.
different religious leaders who are in conflict?
Um, it stays at the secular level. They're not the religious leaders, but it's yeah, it's about how they practice and who's going to determine how people practice in the country. And that's yeah, that turns into kind of a subject and not a happy one.
So it's so there's going to be a religiously motivated conflict,
Mhm.
but it's not currently religiously motivated. It's I
It,
want
it's
prestige.
it's it's yeah. We start to see the roots of it late in the book, but it's not active right now. It's but that there's a lot of pieces moving at times.
You're being really cagey. I can't get
Well,
any
it's
spoilers out of you.
really it's so hard to know what to say and what not to say because especially because I haven't written all of it and I don't want to say something
Yeah.
that doesn't quite play out.
Yeah, no, you
Um,
can spoil, like, the first book because 'cause you've written
mhm,
that. You know what definitely happens in there, but only
yeah.
if you want to.
Well, let me put it this way. The king, having exiled his only son and his wife being long dead, chooses to marry a new princess. And she happens to come from a country that doesn't practice the same way they do. And this
Oh.
immediately creates a conflict inside the country because she wants them to do it her way, which is not how they all do it. And
Oh, that's
so there start to be,
so it's like an internal conflict.
and the Council of Lords starts to fracture on how do they deal with this. Wait, we have an exiled prince, we have a war over here. Now we have a new queen who wants to do things all differently and is yelling about all of us being heretics. And the council starts to split, and that's
Why did he was that a move to get peace or get something from them to bring in this foreign princess?
um no, it's to punish his son.
Oh, was
He's going
this
to marry a young princess, have a new kid, and then his son, who's exiled, will be fully disowned.
Oh, okay.
So he picks a young princess who is bound to give him that new son. And the king is not at that point concerned about her religion. He's more concerned about need a new prince because I
State of
really
he's
want to
more
get rid of.
yeah, he's more concerned about how fertile is she and how
Yeah,
quickly can we get the new prince going.
and yeah. So the religion problem isn't on his mind, but it is very much on the minds of the nobles as they
He doesn't
have to
sound
deal with
like
this.
he cares too much about anything outside of, like, his own little he wants power, he wants a pretty princess to give him a new prince,
He is
does not seem to care too much about anything else.
he's not being a very good king at this point in time,
I'm
and
wondering if that's gonna lead to, some kinda coup down road.
oh, you're good. You're good. Like, that's that's kind of what this sets up is how are they gonna deal with it? Is that the right move?
And is
Uh,
that gonna bring the Lady of Ravensmere and her hubby into this?
and how do they get involved in this bigger conflict? Yeah.
That's wild. So, we've got that big conflict at the top. Is there conflicts beneath that?
Smaller ones, yes. The Lords spend a lot of time jockeying for power among them, and they basically are two major families. Ginevra's family is one of them, and then there are the Corsies, and everybody takes sides underneath that. And there's going to be a lot of lines drawn as all of those conflicts come into play as they take sides in some of the big stuff. And the fact that you know Sir Wyatt is going to turn his back on his family is going to be you know stuff like that.
So he got I forgot his name.
Conic.
The Conic. So he got the castle up near the north. How is he with his neighbors that are in his country? Are they upset that or they're like, you know, making
They're
fun of him because you got a castle, but it's broken down?
um we don't actually see too much of them because they're not actually very close. Nobody wanted to live too close to the border when it was a conflict area, so they're kind of farther away. So they're kind of
So they're kind of isolated
they're
then.
very isolated. So the people they're actually socializing with are like craftsmen, townspeople, a few freeholders,
But that
some
must draw like,
sabotage.
yeah, that might draw like a certain type of person though to live in close to a conflict zone. Like you have to have a high tolerance for risk,
Yeah. Or you have to be so poor you can't go anywhere else.
or
Which
you're
is,
profiteering from.
well, there's okay. We're not going to say that that doesn't happen either. There's definitely one of the freeholders who falls onto the not so nice side of the scale, and
Do they have to deal with that? Sort out who's more profiteering and.
they don't know that one yet. I know
Oh,
that one.
okay.
They don't know that
Okay.
one
So
yet.
that's not a current thing that they're
No,
on their
no.
list.
Um, as a reader, you'll have a pretty good idea when you meet those characters that, oh wait, these are the bad guys. Well, not bad guys, but these are the
They're
not nice
morally
people.
gray.
Yeah, but in story, that all hasn't come out yet. It will.
Is the Northern Border quiet in this first book, or is there like flare-ups and some conflict and
There's going to be some
he's got to
flare-ups
ride
and
out and
conflicts.
deal
Actually, the
with it?
castle gets
And
attacked.
okay.
We get a couple of attacks of the castle itself. So those are fun. I like those.
That's wild. No, this is very cool.
I hope it reads as well as I make it sound.
No, this is really interesting. Like, it's an interesting view on, like, I like the way you put it, that there's magical, there's all this magical fantasy stuff happening, but it's not here. And I think that's so cool that like they're hearing about it and trying to go about their lives, but there's conflict and there's other stuff that I just think that's very cool. You're looking at me skeptically.
No, I'm not at all.
My brain's just churning on that because I write slice of life, and it's just interesting how you approached it. So I'm sorry I peppered you so many questions.
No. I like questions. Questions are a good way to answer. The thing is, it all grew out of a simple question.
Okay,
as
I like that.
things start to. Long ago, oh geez, 13 years ago now, I had a discussion with a friend of mine about what would it be like to be a girl in this situation who's sent away, who, she's in a strange place that supposedly is her country, but doesn't feel like her country anymore. What's it really like? And it kind of started out as a kind of thought experiment. What does it feel like? And then gradually it turns into,
yeah, and what do you do in that situation? Because you got to make the best of it.
And you don't have any choices, and you just have to live with it. And then it turns into all these other things that come along with it that force her to grow up as she and have to deal with things that aren't big adventures. She's not a superwoman. She never picks up a weapon in the book. By reference, we know she knows how to shoot a bow, but she's used to using it for hunting, not for defense. She never picks up a weapon in the whole book, because that's not true. She picks up her dagger. She does pick up her dagger, but she's not fighting off 5 guys. She's not defending
that's not
things.
Her role, though.
Yeah. And it's this other role about being this support person and making sure that things are done at home. And
no, it's an important
when you don't
job.
get to be the quester.
Yeah, no, I mean, not every person in a fantasy world can be off. If everybody was off questing, then nobody would be farming, or like there'd be nothing to eat and nothing to wear.
Yes, and
there'd be no metal to smith, so they'd have no armor if everybody was out questing. So some people have to stay and be the support.
Yeah.
And hope that the things people are questing after or
slaying, we hope those people get their stuff
done.
You guys get your stuff done over there and don't let them come here. And
yeah, but these things don't happen here. I like that.
Yeah.
No, that's a really cool way of framing it. And then you have the option later of like what things bleed through, what things, can't be kept over there and or are happening here and we just don't know about it.
Yes. Or ultimately, I can go find one of those questers and find out what it's like someplace over there where
True.
things happen. And
True. So this is a trilogy. Is this the only books you're going to set in this world, or do you might set it's such an interesting world.
there might be other things. I have written a short story. I have ideas for a couple other short stories about some of the minor characters in here, filling out their stories. Um, but every once in a while, I toy with, uh, yeah, seeing what it's like in some other places that are not here. Um, what is it like in some of those other places where there's maybe a little more magic or monsters or something, and seeing what they look like from a different point of view.
No,
But
I think that could be cool.
but I don't have any fixed plans for those
Oh
right
no.
now. It's there's a character kicking around in my mind. We'll see how that develops eventually.
Yeah, no, you've still got to finish the trilogy before you can do anything else.
Well, and then I owe this urban fantasy book to somebody else, and
Oh, so do you also have an urban fantasy series?
not yet. I have a short story coming out in an anthology. It's a shared world, and then I will be writing a novel in that
Is
that
this
I have
urban
to.
fantasy like, because urban fantasy used to be no romance or very little romance, action, solving crime.
Yeah,
Mostly it
there's
was
no there's
police procedural, solving a mystery. Like maybe there was some romance in the background, maybe not.
at best that would be romance in the background, but at this moment there isn't even someone to have romance with for her.
Oh,
It's
I like that
really
kind of urban fantasy.
it's
I like
really her book's going to be about how she gets sucked into plots that she doesn't really want to be in because she's perfectly happy in her life as a very expensive freelance jewel thief. And she gets sucked into all this stuff that she doesn't want to be part of. She doesn't want to be part of international plots. She wants to steal people's jewels for money. It's
that's
much safer
cool.
that way. And instead, she
That's
ends up in this other
that's
stuff.
very cool. That's my kind of urban fantasy. Strong character, them doing their thing in their magic world, perfectly happy with it, getting sucked into other things that they don't want to be in, and trying to extricate themselves.
And she ends up with a magic dog. That's in the short story in this anthology. She ends up with a magic dog, and then she's like, she can't get rid of the magic dog, even if she wanted to. And so now her adventures feature a magic dog. And yeah, it just goes
Oh,
from there.
what kind of a magic dog? Does
Um,
it like do something specific? That's like one of my favorite like fantasy series of all time. It was urban fantasy, and she at one point picked up a magic poodle, but it could like transform into this bigger monster. And, like at first she thought it was just this like bad-tempered poodle, and then like something attacked her and knocked her down, and like because she was fighting another thing, and then like this giant her poodle like swells up into this monster thing and like monster smash. She's like, okay, I like you now.
um, this is a dog she rescues from the bad guys who are mistreating it. It is trained to attack and kill people who use magic. It's actually part of how she figures out that she's using magic that she didn't know she had. And the dog sense magic, and they're supposed to kill people who use it. And instead,
Oh.
she rescues this one, and it's her friend. And it's big and scary, and it has silver eyes and tusks and a face like a gargoyle. And its name is Henrietta. And yeah. So at some point, I have to write that novel too.
Yeah, I would say so.
I have a few months before that one's due, though.
Which anthology is it going to be in?
It's called Hit World Valkyrie's Initiative. It actually came out last year, but it's being re-released in the spring because it switched publishers.
Oh, which publisher's doing it?
It was with CKP, Chris Kennedy Publishing, and now it's going to be with Hit World Press. It's going to.
Okay. No, I've not heard of that one.
It didn't make a very big splash the first time around, which is part of why things are changing.
I see. So they're expanding it with new stories.
And yeah, and doing some other things. And
When does that come out?
the anthology, theoretically, if I'm not talking out, I'm probably talking out of turn. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell people this.
Oh,
But the should come out in late spring. The
of
anthology
next year.
We're in 2023, so that will be 2024. Yes. So in the late spring of 2024, the anthology will come out again.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Are they meant
stories.
to be like romance or just anything urban fantasy on a theme?
All of the characters in that anthology are female characters, and the idea is that they are badass women who don't fit into stereotypes. We are absolutely forbidden from going to just your standard power girl kind of thing. They have to be awesome characters, and they're assassins, they're thieves, they're an actual honest to goodness Valkyrie, who all end up loosely on a team together eventually.
Oh, that's cool. Taking on, so you'd be co-writing possibly with other people if they're all on a team.
I don't know what the plan is eventually. I mean, there is a plan for a big group novel and some co-writing. We got to get some individual novels out of the way, get some of the characters really built in and established.
That's pretty cool. I've never written in a shared world, but I've heard of, it's just interesting. It's a whole other way of doing things.
Yeah, this one's new for me too, but it's good people that I get to work with. So
yeah, I like strong women characters. I have a few of my own. I am a strong woman character in the adventure of my life. Also, I'm also a fictional character and a villain. Because why not?
Yeah, well, everybody's the hero of their own story.
I'm also the villain of my own. I'm also the villain of my own. I am the hero and the villain of my own story.
It's an interesting idea how to structure that if you were going to write it.
I do. I did. There's this. I didn't know what to do for a newsletter when I first started as an indie author because all I do is write and work. I don't have a life outside of that. Between working 40 hours a week and commuting, I'm dead. I'm exhausted. Yeah. I don't have a life outside of it. I see family at like reunions and weddings and birthdays, weddings and funerals and things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I just had my characters. I just wrote what they were doing, and at some point there was a portal between their cave and my apartment, and then it just started chronicling them coming to my apartment, bothering me, wanting, why did you write this scene for me? I want more page time. That kind of, and then it evolved into them having adventures in this world, and then I wrote 2 novels based off of that, and the villain in there was like, so it ended up, because they're coming over here, and it was like we ended up having alternate Earths, so that meant that there were infinite versions of me. So that meant there could be an evil version of me trying to bump off all the other Melindas across the whatever whatever you call that, the multiverse. Marvel was doing it, and I was like, you know what, I should have my own multiverse.
Absolutely.
And one of them should be an evil version of me, and she should kidnap the real me. And my characters should maybe have to save me because they want more page time. I don't know that they're ever going to actually rescue me, because the longer they take, the more adventures they have, the more I have to write about them. So I'm not sure if I'm ever going to get rescued from myself.
That's
it's
good.
Totally a ridiculous thing. So if you don't know what to do with your newsletter, just ask your characters. I'm sure they have lots of ideas.
Oh my gosh, that's a scary
you may end up in a situation like me. That's the only downside. So it's totally ridiculous. They destroyed my apartment building in one of the books. Oh, it's just
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? This is what happens when you when you write fantasy. It sometimes
Yes.
takes over. Ah, is there anything else you want to say about the Lady of Ravensmere or the
uh,
sequels or the urban fantasy?
that one I can't tell too much about. I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about right now.
Any other spoilers you want to give away? No pressure.
um, okay. Okay. Oh, I do feel like I need to say this
Sure.
because, well, Twitter and the internet being what it is.
Oh, you mean X, because it's like not Twitter.
I refuse to call it that. I refuse to call it that because that conjures up all sorts of images that are not Twitter.
I know. But it isn't. It's not been Twitter since he bought it.
Well, no, that's true too. But that's a different issue. Um, so she is 13, and for reasons that happen, the wedding gets bumped up. And it happens before she's 16. I have to say this because otherwise people get all weird. There's no sex. No, but there's no sex with a young girl. She does not have any sex in the book. It doesn't matter that they have a legal marriage. They do not have sex. It doesn't happen. They don't have sex. Because otherwise people go, oh, you have a 13-year-old girl having... No, she's not having sex.
Unfortunately, it does happen in the world.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
But not in your book.
But
it's not happening here.
It's not happening here. It's happening someplace else. Not happening here. Because some people were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. And I had to say, look, there's no sex happening. They don't have sex. It's not that you don't see it. It's that it doesn't happen. So nobody has to worry about that because that's kind of icky and we're not doing that.
They're concerned about her welfare. That's how you know you've written a really good character. They're concerned about her welfare.
Or they're very strange people sometimes. But yeah. So no sex in the book. Not even imagined off the pages sex. It's not happening.
So their marriage gets postponed. So maybe in the third book when she's even older?
Yeah, something like that.
Or maybe they'll push you into writing a fourth book.
Who knows? Who knows? But they're legally married, and it is one of the things that they are dealing with is she is a girl. She has a girl's reactions to this. A 13-year-old girl doesn't react to sex the way a grown woman does, or even an older teen. And so even a kiss kind of freaks her out the first time because it's all new. It's different. So yeah, no sex. Eventually, maybe, but not anytime soon.
Not until she's older.
Not until she's older, because that would be icky, and I'm not doing that on paper.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. Yeah, that's a little too. Yeah. Boy, where do we go from here?
Yeah. It's a weird thing to point out, but since it's come up in other places, I have to.
I'm glad you pointed it out because, if they are married, how did they get an illegal marriage if it's illegal?
It is legal. It's not illegal. It's a legal marriage.
It is a legal. Oh, I thought
Yes,
you said
but
an illegal marriage. You said it's an illegal marriage. Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's on paper, it's a marriage, but it's not in the sense of being romantic or any of that.
There's no Beauty and the Beast in here.
Not anytime soon. None of that. So
well,
I'm trying to think if there's anything else good to tell.
Okay. I'm glad we put that fear to rest.
Well, there's bound to be somebody. There's always somebody. There's always one person. Someday I'm going to put out a cookbook based on it.
Oh, really? So there's recipes in there?
There's food. And people tend to think that the Middle Ages are all, roasted turkey legs and unseasoned stuff. And I actually use real medieval recipes when I talk about their food. It's based on stuff from actual medieval cookbooks. And so eventually I'm going to make a little cookbook of them because some of them sound weird and some of them sound yummy. And
have you tried any of them? Have you made any of them yourself?
I haven't, because my
before
husband...
you put out the cookbook, you need to try.
Well, I might put it might have a thing about, try at your own risk. Um, but my husband would object to me doing some of these things. And some of them are really weird stuff. Nobody eats songbirds nowadays.
Well, you would substitute with chicken or,
Yeah,
if you can get Cornish hen or
Cornish
something.
games. Yeah, but every food dish that gets mentioned in there is based on an actual medieval recipe that I've actually read. Haven't cooked them, but I've read them. And yeah, someday I'm going to put them all together in a little cookbook.
Maybe just, squeeze in one every couple of weeks. Just don't tell him. If it's good, be like, you know where I got the recipe from? It wasn't TikTok. I got it from the TikTok of the Middle Ages. Then you could put a little anecdote in your cookbook. Tried it. This was the reaction.
Don't do this one
this
again.
and substitute with this and this if you want it to be actually edible.
Yeah.
Because I think some things were different back then, the way they had some different things. You may have because they were grinding flour with a millstone.
And there's some very vague measurements that don't really translate precisely, because
That's why you got to test it. You got to figure out what the actual ones are.
Because sometimes you read them and you go, I don't think that sounds like a good even mix, but eggs were a different size, so you would have needed a different number of eggs. And yeah, the flour's ground much more coarsely than we would.
That's wild. So you'll have to try them and
Yeah, I'm a nerd. I admit this freely. Like, I have too much fun sometimes with these.
It's good to nerd out on things that you're writing about.
Yeah.
I think it makes it more real too if you're thinking about like, okay, what are they eating? What are they I'm not looking at medieval cookbooks. I'm looking at what will grow in a country that's 90% forest.
Well, no, that's
so they're eating a lot of
too.
potatoes.
That's important too.
And tubers and roots and they
Yeah.
do have bread, but it's not made out of flour because where are you going to get the wheat from? They're living in an enchanted forest. So obviously they don't have wheat. So they're using other things. So everything is gluten-free there because there's no wheat. There's no cattle. So they're not drinking dairy milk either. So,
Yeah.
So I just think about that. Like, what can they do have goats and stuff. So there's a lot of mountains.
Yeah.
So it's good, goat's milk, goat's cheese.
That's important too. I geek out a little bit on fabric too. I specify, it's linen and wool. There's no cotton because there's no cotton there.
I had to research that too. I was like, all right, what are these people wearing? I'm like, okay, flax growers along the river, they're wearing flax.
Yep.
They've got deer and things, so they can make leather from deer skin. They've got leather. Just not cow leather.
Well, yeah. It's other thing leather.
Yeah. From what I was researching, basically, if it's an animal skin and there's like a specific preparation for the leather, if you do it in that way, no matter what the heck it's made out of, it's still called leather.
Yep. Because it's refers to the process as
much the tanning and all. That's what I found. So I was like, okay, cool. So I'll just mention it once that this is deer because we don't have cows, and we'll just call it leather from thenceforth because we need to get specific. But no, that's kind of like that adds to the world building though, knowing like what they're eating, that they have sweet potatoes and pumpkins, but not wheat,
Yeah.
And then you can do fun things like create like magical, like things that only grow on the magical trees in the forest because,
Yeah.
Some specific like fruits or whatever. Because it's enchanted, so
yeah,
it can have random fruit on it.
It can do whatever you want at that point. It can
do whatever. Yeah, that's it. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh well, thank you for having me. This has been good times.
You can come back anytime, as long as we talk about a different book. It's all good.
Well, I'll come back in the spring. We'll talk urban fantasy when the anthology
Yes!
comes out.
And magical dogs.
Yes.
And I'll remember what book series. I think it was Kate Daniels. I feel like it was her attack poodle is the
I'll
one I
have
was
to look
thinking
for
of.
that.
The poodle comes up later in the series.
But I'll have to look for that, yeah.
Yeah. At first, all it does is like slobber on things, and she's not happy about it, and it just keeps following her, and then it swells up into I forget exactly what it becomes, and actually like takes on a monster, and she's like, okay, now I like you. Because she's a mercenary. She's not got time for a poodle.
Poodle, yeah.
It doesn't fit with the image. And she's dating a lion shifter, so
That really doesn't fit with her image.
Yeah, it really doesn't. That's her point of view too. She's like, okay, this doesn't work. I saved you. Now you need to go leave, find somebody else to take care of you because this would not work. But yeah, I love the Kate Daniels series. One of my favorites. Uh, it's sort of urban fantasy. It's sort of like magical catastrophe too. It's the premise is that there was magic came back and it knocked out technology, but then the magic recedes. It comes in waves. So then electricity and cars and stuff work again. So it comes in waves. And when there's a magic wave on, like gods can manifest and like really wild stuff can happen. And when the magic is down and the tech is up, gods can't manifest, but you could run your car. So your car might have a regular engine and like a some kind of magical method for making your car work for when the magic waves hit, because they're not predictable. And sometimes they last for a few weeks, sometimes they last for a few hours. So you need, or you just, she rides her donkey.
Well,
because they work in magic and in tech. So
that works,
you end up having like this mix of like technology, magically altered technology, and people who just get out a horse and draw their carriage because horses always work. It's a really interesting mix, and she's dealing with magical problems, and as the crazy past and the ultra, some magic. I think he's a god. Is like her like father. And she's sort of hiding from. He wants to take over the world. She doesn't want to be a part of that kind of thing. So yeah, it's one of my favorite series. I was very sad when it ended, but I was very happy to see that there was new books 10 years on from when it ended. So hopefully that's going to be a series and not just a duology. I keep stalking the author's website. There's no information. Damn it. I need to know.
They should spend more time telling us what's going on, and well, not less time writing, but
I mean, I understand because like my own I write down like what I'm planned to do for the year, and then the characters completely like nuke that plan by like March. We are off on some wild tangent and we are not writing the books that we plan to write. We are somewhere off in left field. So I totally understand that. And like, so I try not to promise something unless I'm sure the characters will show up and do what they're supposed to do in it. Like until I'm actually writing it, I'm like, okay, this might actually happen. Otherwise, like, I don't want to disappoint people. I don't want to say, yes, I'm working on, book whatever in this series. And then the characters be like, we don't feel like doing that.
Yeah.
We'd rather go steal things from a fortress in hell for no reason.
That's true.
Or other strange, or chase dragons or, poke a bear or like just anything except whatever I've decided that we're supposed to be doing in this book.
Yeah.
I hope your characters don't do that to you. I hope that you are able to put out a schedule of what books you're going to write and that they actually show up and stick to it. It is not fun when they don't.
No. And inevitably, new characters always show.
Yes.
Trying to make the current characters do not even what they're told to do, but something productive.
Yeah.
It's a running joke with another writer friend of mine that
and the new characters are cooler than the ones you already have, so you're like,
Sometimes. Sometimes they're just random. I call her up sometimes and go, so I came up with a new plot for a steamy romance. I don't write steamy romance. I never write steamy romance. I
Yeah,
don't
me
even
either.
really read steamy romance. I like romance fine, but I don't like it particularly steamy.
Mm,
Nope.
same.
On one of those days, I call her up and go, so I've got this plot for a Highlander who catches an English spy, but she's only spying because her sister is being held captive. And while he's taking her prisoner, they fall in love and have lots of wild sex. And she goes, sounds good. Do you know any romance writers who want a plot? And I go, no. And she
See,
said,
that's it. You need to
then
make
go.
friends with the romance writers so you can hand them your plots, and you can take their plots that are not romance. Every once in a while, I get an idea for some kind of romantasy, but
Yeah.
I
And
know
it's,
that I I'm not interested in the romance part, so I know that the other stuff that's going
it's
on would be
yeah,
more interesting, and I'd end up writing that, and I'd be like, oh wait, the romance is supposed to be happening here,
yeah.
but it's not.
I'm never going to write these. But I've had 3 of them at least that I can distinctly remember where my characters are cooperating and instead my brain's going, so you could write this steamy romance about Highlanders or, I don't know, ladies pretending to be servants, or I can't remember what the newest one was. But, and I'm like, no, stop that, brain. Please go away.
I
And I
mean,
really don't want that character here for
yeah,
confusing things.
yeah. I don't get it's very rare that I get a romance idea. It's more, um, we could have this whole war sequence. It's more stuff like that, or
Well,
wouldn't it be cool if
yeah,
some epic fantasy thing here?
yeah, those are good too. Those don't those don't come as far out of left field though. Those are always like, oh, well, it would make this more exciting. It probably would, but it's not very convenient. But yeah, the romance ones just come out of left field to be annoying.
Oh, that's wild. I get the why don't we write the war between gods and angels, or gods and monsters, or anything and anything? It's, um,
Brains are funny things.
I mean, I have a whole bunch of wars that are referenced that I haven't written yet, that are
Yeah,
we could actually write this.
I'm sure people
Assuming
would love to read it when you get there.
I'm assuming the characters show up and actually do
Well,
it. I wouldn't promise people that we're gonna do the war of anything until they actually showed up and the war happened.
yeah.
Because at any point they could be like, I'd rather not. Let's not do that today. Let's go over here and do. Maybe the war is happening, but it's not happening here. We're doing something else right here, and
That
you're
it's
in my
happening
point of
someplace
view.
else.
So
Yeah.
you are captive. You are stuck. You can't see what's going on over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, characters are wild.
Mm-hmm.
So fun though, and we need them. You can't have a book without fictional characters. So even though they
Yeah,
drive us nuts, we
truly.
still have to write them, and we love them. We love the mayhem. At least I do.
I
I
do
wouldn't have
too.
written so many books if I didn't.
It's what makes it fun. It's what keeps it fun.
Yeah, I like not knowing what they're going to do next, and that does make it sort of complicated to plot things and promise people certain books at certain times, but I like seeing what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Most of the
That's
time I'm wrong anyways.
that's what keeps me going is I got to find out how the story ends because I don't know. So
It's better when we don't know.
that's what I tell myself all the time.
Because it means that it can go somewhere you didn't, somewhere really cool that you never would have expected.
Yeah.
And then you read it and you're like, oh, we were headed this way all the time. I just didn't notice.
Exactly.
Characters, how did they keep me from seeing that?
Yes. Exactly.
That last book was like that. I thought at the end they pulled a bait and switch on me, and then I reread the whole thing. I'm like, wait, they were setting this up from page 1, and I just didn't notice.
Exactly. Yeah.
This was not foreshadowing. This is them pulling the wool over my eyes, literally.
Yeah.
I've had that happen where you plot out, okay, they're going to do this. And they get to that scene and they're like, I'm going to do the total opposite. You can't make me do what was in that plot.
Well,
And I'm going to wreck all your plans for the sequel.
well, to bring it around to my book, there's a saboteur later
Oh,
on in the book. And I
do tell.
thought I knew who the saboteur was.
Uh-oh.
And I thought, I'm 3/4 of the way through the book. I think I know who the saboteur is. I'm sure it's this character. It wasn't that character. It was this other character. And I went, really? Really? And then, yeah, I went back and discovered that, yeah, those hints were there all along. The hints were always setting up this character and not the character I thought it was. But I didn't know it until I got there.
No, see, I like when that happens. Because if it surprises you, it's going to surprise the reader.
I hope so.
I mean, I also hope so. I hope
maybe it doesn't.
I hope they don't catch the hints that I missed.
Maybe somebody reads it and goes, "Oh, I saw this one coming right from the beginning," and
you can be like, "Well, I didn't know, and I was writing it."
I think
if I didn't know.
I think somebody famous, but I don't remember who, said that a third of readers should be able to predict where you're going. A third of them should be completely surprised, and a third should kind of be in the middle where they see some of it, but not all of it.
So or they see some of it and they're like, ooh, I hope it's going where I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I figure if a few guess it, fine, as long as there's some who don't guess it.
Yeah, are surprised. I hope there's some who don't guess some of the things, because I have some that are kind of twisty, the story.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite one is really twisty like that, because it involves a mind mage, and the mind mage is very specific thing that they want to happen. Then they're not the villain. There's something very specific that they want to happen. So they're like playing both sides to get it to happen. It's in the main character's best interest. Is something that they're just not going to do without some meddling. So and some supporting characters are not going to do the other things. So the mind mage is like, well, I see what needs to be done, and I see that nobody else sees it. And then, or they, they're not going to do it if I don't get involved. So I'm going to play with all their minds and make sure this thing happens because it needs to.
Cool.
He's just tired of a certain situation, so he's like, I'm just one of the characters is it's the Curse Breaker series, which cover is behind me for the book 1, and this is like the 9th book, and like the Starn is the main character, and he has a son that nobody knows about. I mean, some people know about him by the 9th book, but certain really important characters don't. And this mind mage, he's not human. He's a owlcat creature. He is just tired of like trying to keep straight who knows who about what, and is like, I just don't want to deal with this anymore. Like, you need to just reveal the kid to other people so that we can all deal with the situation that you are in a logical adult manner. If you're not going to do this, I'm going to make you. So he just manipulates everybody to get into so that the revelation can happen. Just ignoring the fact that like my main character was wounded from dealing with some other shenanigans that were going on. It's like, I'm just gonna make sure that you get the help you need. They find out about the kid, and because they don't have anywhere to live, they're just kind of staying with random people. So like, if the important people find out, they can do something about this and get them some kind of actual living situation instead of crashing on people's floors, which is not a good idea when you have small children.
No, not usually.
And it's not easy to do. So yeah, so like that, I didn't know that he was going to do that. I was trying to figure out how we were going to reveal the little kid, and that this creature, this owlcat was like, this mind mage was like, I've got it. I'm going to do it.
Okay.
I'm going to manipulate things so it happens. And it got a bit psychological thriller there towards the end, but yeah, I didn't see that coming. Like, we need to reveal the kid we've been promising, but I couldn't make the main character do it. He wouldn't do it. So somebody else had to take the wheel. He was just going to keep fighting it, keep trying to keep the kid a secret. I was like, no, it's been 9 books. You have to let it go. We've been promising this since book 1. You let it happen. So, yeah. So I wasn't unhappy when the other character stepped in and was like, I've got this. I'm going to make it happen. And then the my mage like feels kind of guilty. Like, well, what if they separate the kid from the parent, from the father and his uncle? And he's like, well, maybe I should check. So then he puts this mind games with the people that he's going to reveal the kid to make sure that like they would take him in and, with his family, and like, let me make sure this is that the situation I'm setting up will actually be a good one. So like, that was a lot of fun to write because I had no idea that we were going to be doing that. So that was a complete surprise.
Oh, that's fun.
But it was very entertaining to write and to read. And it accomplished the mission. The little boy was found out. They lived in a much better situation because of it. So
that sounds cool.
That's it was a wild ride. I don't remember why we went on this tangent now.
I don't know either, but it's fun.
Yeah. And we've been on for almost an hour and a half. So I am going to end it in a few minutes. Is there anything else you want to say about Lady of Ravensmere or the sequels or the urban fantasy, which you can't talk about?
No, but truly, if you have me back in the later part of the spring, I will give you all the details on the urban fantasy and what's going on with that.
Yeah, no, you're welcome back. I want to hear all about it. And I think that's going to do it for this episode of Fantasy Lore and More. We've been talking to Mary McKenna about Lady of Ravensmere. And I hope you'll check it out. I'll have all the details in the description or the show notes, depending on where you're listening or watching. And have a great day or great night, wherever you are. I'm Melinda Kucsera, your indie fantasy author, and that's a wrap.